Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. This is Dr. Kim. We're going to be having a major discussion about beyond the detox, healing the mold toxic body when everything seems to making you react. Now, mold toxins has been talked about a lot on my platform and others as well. But mold sometimes could be simple, but a lot of times, about 90% of the time that I work with clients can be very complex where even though they might have tried multiple things with different practitioners, or maybe they have done research and doing multiple things, never seems to get through the overall recovery they're looking for, and they're still reacting, becoming a challenging thing. One thing that worked out for me very well is to really getting to the root of the issue, not just about the mold, but there's a major impact of their environment, the nervous system, the cellular issues, along with how their detox pathways, especially the organs and detox pathways, which are liver and your bile, are being supported properly, rebalance the microbiome. And lastly, how do we enhance your resiliency? Because if you're doing all this work and constantly having to react to multiple things in your environment, then what was the whole point? Never alone spending the money and putting the investment into your health. So that's the part that it's been really focusing on and working through this. The program that I want to introduce, and I introduced in the last webinar last month, is called the ENCORE Method. And we talked about cellular detox last month. We're talking more specifically on the mold and how this can actually help with the objective for today. The objective for today is to understand the pathophysiology of the mold toxins and the immune dysregulation, and identifying the common mistakes in mold detoxification protocols, and learning about the ENCORE method and how step-by-step and systemic biology approach to treatment can actually help enhance the recovery rate for a lot of people. And I've had cases where clients are now able to get rid of the mold issue within 5 to 6 months. And one thing that I always tell my clients is, after 5 to 6 months of working together, I don't want to ever see you again. Not because I don't like them, but it's just because the objective for you is to recover and then live your life. And lastly, is to gain clinical pearls for sensitive, non-responding mold patients. This is a key thing that I am really right now building up for practitioners, but I want to share this with you today. My name is Dr. John Kim. I'm a functional medicine pharmacist with almost 20 years of clinical experience. I spoke at several medical conferences, both here in the United States and internationally. My main focus is looking at root cause medicine in treating chronic illnesses, dealing with gut immune imbalance and hormonal dysregulation. I actively lecture on mitochondrial dysfunction, cell danger response, along with mold toxicity and stealth infection. The credibility of me is that I've been doing this for 19 years, and especially with people who are dealing with a very sensitive topic and not able to get to the overall breakthrough they're looking for. It's very tough. I've dealt with my own health issue. So if you haven't heard from me, or this is the first time learning about me, you're going to learn more about me now, because I actually had a heart attack back in June of 2015. I had an 85% blockage in my LAD, lower anterior descending artery, and it was a surprise thing. I was pretty fit. I used to work out even more than I'm doing at this point in time. I thought I was eating clean. I thought I was in the top health, and especially being trained in functional medicine, I thought I knew what I was doing. Unfortunately, June 4th of 2015 was the moment that everything had changed. So result from this was that I had to go into the hospital with a chest pain, and even the doctors didn't really know what was going on because I didn't show any clinical signs and symptoms of heart attack. Never alone, my troponin level was less than 1. So when they did the echocardiogram, they found out that my lower ventricle, my lower portion of the heart, was not pumping correctly. And so they were shocked. They brought me to the cath lab, and they found out I had an 85% blockage. How can a 33-year-old patient end up having to have this clinical setting? That was a moment that really shifted this process. Now, people could be like, you know what? How can you go through this process and then not blame God? I think I'm more fortunate now than ever that I had to go through this, and God allowing me to experience this really shifted me to look at root cause medicine much more differently. Now I'm actually working to helping clients who are in a similar situation, not knowing what their root cause issue is and getting through this. Long story short, what I learned from my mold journey, and then the root cause issue I forgot to mention is that I had a positive test for high levels of mold antibodies. And then on top of I had positive for Bartonella, Epstein-Barr, Mycoplasma pneumoniae, high levels of heavy metals, especially aluminum and mercury. The reason that I had high levels of mercury was as a kid, I used to break mercury thermometers and play around with the mercury. Yep. So I did it, and I had toxicity level up the wazoo, inflammation, stress response, childhood traumas, everything came into play. A perfect storm causing that chaos in my life. One thing I learned from that recovery journey, it took me 2 years to get rid of it. What I learned from my overall health journey is that complete healing is impossible without addressing the mold issue. Mold plays a huge role into your systemic inflammation, but much more, which we'll discuss about. And use of proper testing and clinical assessment is key. Supporting the cell membrane, the health and the integrity of your cells is so vital for you to recover. So freedom from mold is possible. And I've experienced it myself and my clients. Now, what is mold toxicity? How is this different from mold allergies? Some people will say, you know what, I have mold allergies, so I don't have to deal with this issue. But then I talk about mold toxicity even more, right? So when you talk about mold allergies, talks about IgE mediated. So these are people who have hypersensitivity issues to mold, resulted in some of the ear, nose, throat issues like sneezing, congestion, and watery eyes, and could be detected from skin pricks or serum IgE testing. Specifically, mold toxicity is caused by mycotoxins. These are non-protein, non-IgE toxins, where these toxins are lipophilic, meaning that it can actually accumulate in the cells and your mitochondria, in your brain and your fat tissue, especially in your gut, and these are causing chronic systemic dysfunction. So how does mold, or at least mycotoxins, disrupt the cellular membrane? I'm questioning a lot of people, especially practitioners, not talking about cellular issue, is because it's very new, but it's also hard to understand. So let's just break this down. So when you're dealing with mycotoxins, it actually disrupts the cell membrane by causing something called lipid peroxidation. Mycotoxins causing reactive oxygen species, oxidize the lipids, or at least the lipid profile of the cell membrane, damage the fluidity. So simply, basically what it comes out to is, if you think about the cell membrane is comprised of fat, and the fat gets oxidized. So if you don't know what oxidize is, think about burning sugar, right? Burning sugar, and that tardy substance of that sugar, that's exactly what's happening in your cells, right? The fat molecule, at least the fat bilateral structure of your cell membrane, gets damaged from mold toxins. This can trigger something called cell danger response. I talked about cell danger response last month in my webinar. If you want to watch that webinar, you can go into my YouTube channel, Dr. Kim Wellness on YouTube, and watch that recording for free. You can learn more about it, but this triggers a danger response in your cells. This can initiate your body to be inflamed in a cascade, causing mitochondrial shutdown. At the same time, something called cardiolipin, which is essentially phospholipid, this bilateral structure of your cells and the inner portion of your mitochondria, mycotoxins, especially ochratoxin A, aflatoxin B, these are coming from grains, coffee. You could drink a lot of moldy coffee. This can cause this issue. These actually oxidize, again, damage the cardiolipin. It actually impairs your cytochrome C. So these are basically the electron transport chain within the cell membrane structure, and actually prevents your body from producing ATP, which is energy. So when you're dealing with a mitochondria plus cell membrane, it equates to a primary target that you want to address. But when you're looking at the mold toxins, I listed out here, and this is a particular thing that I taught in my mold course, and I'm going to be introducing this mold course later in month of August, but today obviously just for education purposes. These are things that are really important. Mold is not a simple thing. Mold actually causes cellular damage. This is the reason why people are stuck. They cannot get better. And if they're trying to do things, they overreact. The cell is undergoing this cell danger response, right? It's already in a hyper-reflexive state. If you're giving glutathione, certain binders, and they're overreacting, we have to look at this in a much deeper cellular way. So ochratoxin A, for instance, actually inhibits mitochondrial respiration. The cells cannot breathe and actually oxidizes the cardiolipin and promotes lipid peroxidation. Aflatoxin B causes membrane disruption. Mutagenic, it actually causes a change in the function of the cells. Trichothecin, which is a black mold, can inhibit protein synthesis, meaning that you're not able to process amino acid properly, which is a building block for your cells and your organs and etc. But you can't do that either, right? And it damages the ribosomes, disrupts the lipid bilayer, and induces apoptosis, meaning that your cells die because of mold toxins there. And zonulolone, right, mimics estrogen, right? It actually mimics estrogen. So for women, and even guys for that matter, this can cause infertility problems. It causes lipid raft, alters the cell signaling, reproductive toxicity, and such. So clinical takeaways, a cellular impact is something that we have to address. So mycotoxins targets the membrane integrity first, right? It actually affects deep down into your cells, and recovery requires a comprehensive approach in membrane rebuilding. That's the reason why I love using body bio PC and antioxidant therapies. Glutathione, you have to use it very carefully because that can also induce additional stress in your cells. But mitochondrial repair and redox balance is something that we have to do. And redox balance is basically is increasing the function of the cells properly to creating energy. That's basically it. If you want some scientific literature in terms of what I'm saying is correct, here it is. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm surprised that a lot of the practitioners and even today, medicine is not really looking at mold toxins, how these cellular issues can be a big problem. So why are people having such a troubled time getting rid of mold? Let's talk about the mistakes. Mistake number one is focusing solely on killing the mold. Yes, I love to kill the mold. You need to kill that thing so this way you keep it under control. Unfortunately, the conventional approach to using antifungal binders and glutathione causes more dysfunction, people overreacting, right? And then having to feel worse than better. So problem is that you're ignoring the host terrain in terms of what the terrain is. How is that person's cellular function, mitochondrial dysfunction, key cell membrane, dysregulated immune system, especially when you have an imbalance of immune system, probably causing autoimmune disease. This is where patients crash or worsens when mold dies off, right? So again, you got to do it carefully. Clinical insight I want to teach is mold causation, especially the sinus and the GI, often responds when the terrain is restored. And killing alone is not equate to healing. People feel worse when you just start killing mold. Mistake number two, ignoring the nervous system regularly, right? Limbic system and the vagus nerve often stuck in a chronic threat mode when you're dealing with mold. So root cause wise, when you look at this, development and relationship trauma, especially family trauma is a big thing. I sometimes actually ask my client how their childhood was, how their marriage is. Do you feel sense of safety if you're living in your house? These are really important factors because these stress response can cause neuroinflammation. And if you deal with mold and other infections, including EMF, it's going to intensify the problem. As a result, the toxic limbic looping is amplifying, or at least making the symptoms worse, and you become much more reactive. So clinical manifestation that we see constantly is that the person might be having to have trouble sleeping, POTS-like symptoms where they feel like they're going to faint, right, if they change certain position or they start walking. Anxiety issue is a big one. And as well as, this is the most popular comment that I see, cannot tolerate any supplements, right? So example is patient reacting to just using simple binders because your limbic system, your nervous system interprets as a threat. Oh my God, there's something going on. And resulted in further symptoms end up having to intensify. Mistake number three that I see, detoxing without the drainage. What does that mean? When you detoxing without doing the proper prep work, you could do all the binders and different things, but many practitioners start glutathione, for instance, because they think that glutathione is a great thing to take. And as was giving binders, without prepping the body correctly, this can cause the toxins to get recirculated in the body, especially your liver, your bile, and your gut is not opened up correctly. Especially if you are dealing with constipation, you should not be taking any of these supplements, right? Your primary focus should be to get you flowing, right? This is the part that needs to be really addressed. So mobilizing the toxins recirculates, and then it actually stimulates the mold cells to release even more mycotoxins as defense, and patients often crashes, resulting in a massive headache, insomnia, flu-like symptoms, and when detox is initiated too quickly. This is the reason why detox funneling, especially is more of a downward stream process where your lymphatic system, bile, and adrenal support needs to be initiated properly before you're doing all this detox. Number four that I see, blue light exposure effect. You might be wondering, Dr. Kim, why do you talk about blue light? Blue light exposure can actually suppress melatonin. Your melatonin is already low because of mold. Now you're actually causing the mitochondria in autophagy. At some point, if you give too much stress in the mitochondria, especially blue light, your mitochondria, I'm not dealing with this anymore. So it actually self destroys themselves, almost like a suicide, called autophagy. And that can actually increase reactive oxygen species or high levels of oxygen species. This reason why you take antioxidants, but now you have much more high issue of priority that you cannot address. And this can worsen something called peroxidation. Your lipid membrane becomes damaged, alters the circadian gene expression, right? All that, and then it can also block leptins, which can result in you not able to lose weight properly, right? You might be wondering why. This is the reason why. And if you're dealing with EMF interference, especially EMF from Wi-Fi, your cell phone, all these things are bombarding our system these days. This can actually affect calcium voltage ion channel to be affected, where you're not able to methylate correctly, you can't detox, and redox regulation can't make energy either. And so now your ATP or your energy output gets worse. And this is the reason why you need to really address the environmental aspect of it. Mistake number five that I see, skipping resiliency building. If you're doing all this work, if you're not able to be resilient to withstand the environmental issues that are surrounding you, then what kind of work did you do, right? So foundation is very important. You want to rebuild the terrain, make sure your cell membrane is rebuilt correctly, restoring the immune tolerance you're dealing with, restoring the nervous system, and lastly is resiliency practice, right? To do breath work, to do red light therapy, circadian rhythm, to look at the sun in a proper time, restoring the mineral and emotional work as well. So without resiliency building, patient experiences relapse on re-exposure, hypersensitivity to supplements and environment, and canary in the coal mine syndrome, where they go into a room, they're like, oh my God, I'm dealing with mold issue. Mistake number six that I see, and this is the last thing I'm going to share with you, is ignoring the cofactors. What does that mean? It's not just about the mold. There's the reason why today's title is Beyond the Toxins, right? Beyond the mold toxins specifically. So such as trauma, is dysregulates your limbic and vagal pathways, EMF exposure I mentioned about, gut dysbiosis, mold causes small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, candida resulted in a histamine response, oxalates coming from green leaf vegetables that you cannot tolerate correctly, so food sensitivity, ammonia issues, so your liver is not able to detoxify correctly, viral reactivation, mold causes immune suppression, resulted in Epstein virus issue, cytomeglia, and hijacking the mitochondrial cells, and immune distraction. The last thing is biofilms. What is that? These are basically protecting thing that's surrounding the mold, and this prevents antifungals from working correctly. As a result, these things can actually worse as time goes. It doesn't get eradicated correctly. So these are cofactors must be addressed simultaneously with mold toxicity for full recovery. In terms of pathophysiology, there's going to be a lot of discussion, but generally I want you to learn that mycotoxins are fat soluble. That's the reason why they can accumulate in the cells, accumulate in certain in the organs, resulted in your cell membrane getting damaged and your fat cells being locked in as chronic reservoir of effect, and mitochondrial membrane, that could be a problem where you're not able to create energy, and the energy output becoming very poor. Oh, sorry. And so for instance, you can't move homes, right? You could get out of a moldy house, you could change your diet, but you could still carry the mold inside your body. That's basically the message I want to give you. That's the reason why you can't get better, right? So you have to get to the root of the issue. Again, same thing I mentioned about molecular mechanism of damage, glutathione depletion, oxidative stress from the mold toxins, blocking protein synthesis. I mentioned about how black mold can cause a problem, and mitochondrial dysfunction as well. And these molecular disruption creates throughout the entire body, and this is the reason why it's a systemic problem as well. On top of the neuroendocrine issues, where you have high levels of HPA axis problem, limbic system, where mycotoxin causes neuroinflammation, and you're constant at fight or flight state. And when you have a vagal tone suppression, this can also impair GI motility and detox. So many reasons why some people can actually have constipation problem because of mold. This also increases small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, mast cell activation syndrome, and high histamine problem. So body perceives mold as a threat, and the increase in trauma as well. This can make your body be in a much more higher vigilant state, constantly looking around. Am I safe? Am I feeling safe? You may not be thinking about that, but your cells and your body's already sensing it. And then mold toxins can also penetrate your blood-brain barrier as well, right? And mycotoxins, especially ochratoxin and gliotoxin, are very small, can actually penetrate the brain and activate something called the microglia. This is basically the inflammatory cells in your brain that's going to be releasing. These can actually cause high levels of nitric oxide. Well, you might be wondering, nitric oxide is so good, why not? If you have too much oxidants, can damage the cells in your brain. And this is what happens with mold. And so neurological symptoms that we see often is brain fog, anxiety and panic attacks, insomnia, depersonalization. I've seen clients where the personality changes because of mold toxins. Even kids are very sensitive. If you notice that your child is having different sort of personality all of a sudden, check for mold. It's a very funny thing about kids with mold toxicity and personality changes, right? The kid becoming really aggressive to their siblings, for instance, lashing out, could be mold issues. Memory issues is a big one, and mood disturbance, neuroinflammation, right? Mycotoxins can persist long after exposure has ended if not properly addressed. And for sensitive people, the phenotypes that you want to look at, there could be, these patients can actually have multiple reactions to certain chemicals, high histamine issues, poor tolerance to supplements, where your mitochondria, I can't tolerate this supplement. I cannot do this. You need to stop doing it. So you become much more sensitive and symptomatic after taking supplements. Trauma background as well, dealing with childhood trauma, abusive relationships, okay? That sense of a hypervigilant state of your nervous system cause a heightened amygdala response, and then your limbic system, where your entire nervous system is in a constant loop, trying to figure out, is it safe? Am I in a threat? This is a problem that the body's undergoing. And when you're dealing with the childhood trauma, especially, or whatever abuse that can be happening, it's going to make the symptoms worse than anything. Locked in symptomatic dominance as well. Constant cortisol, adrenal spike, low HRV, so heart rate variability. So if you're wearing an Oura ring, for instance, and you notice that HRV rating is very low, this is a sense of high sympathetic, high stress response state, and impaired vagal nerve recovery. So you're not able to recover correctly in the body. This is the reason why terrain must be stabilized first before you do anything. So nervous system regulation is something that I teach my client right away. I teach them about the cell membrane, the mitochondrial repair, as well as to rebuilding your resiliency habits, right? Your circadian rhythm restoration, red light therapy, breath work, and gentle movement. Treat the nervous system before the immune system, create safety before the stimulation. Taking supplements can be very stimulating. I learned a lot from working with sensitive clients. My approach nowadays is very specific, which leads into the ENCORE method that I want to introduce you today. What does that look like? The ENCORE method is a 6-phase model rooted in a systematic medicine for addressing mold toxicity. Number one, address the environmental optimization. Remove the exposure sources and create a healing space. That's a problem. If you look at the book of Leviticus in the Bible, in the Old Testament, God tells the Israelites to burn any house or at least remove the mold before they go into the new houses. Right? That's how bad mold is. To a point, God, you know what? If it's really bad, just burn that house down. There's no point of salvaging it. But obviously, you cannot do that nowadays, but that's how much of a threat mold can actually bring to your body. Even God addresses the environmental things first, even before the Israelites were able to get in there, right? And the nervous system regulation, calming the limbic system and restoring the vagal tone. And then the other part of this ENCORE method is cellular repair, rebuilding the mitochondrial cellular membrane, and then optimize the detox pathway and opening the drainage channels before mobilizing toxins, and then to rebalance the microbiome. And then lastly is to rebuilding, or at least to building the long-lasting protection against future exposure, your body become much more resilient to handle these things. Right. So this is what an ENCORE method is. Let's break it down. So things I go much deeper in terms of work. I work with one-on-one clients and my mold course, which I'll reintroduce again in the month of August. This is an important factor in terms of where the hidden source of mold is, right? It could be the building materials you are living in, especially the carpet padding, HVAC system, crawl spaces, and drywall. The food source is important as well. If you go takeout all the time, you cannot tell whether that particular source of food that you're eating from a takeout place or restaurant are really addressing the cleanliness of it. It's a very good idea to cook your house from home, but things that are a common source of mold which can occur is certain grains, coffee, nuts, and dried fruit. And there are certain environmental factors as well. There are airborne spores of mold, clothing contamination. So let's just say if you are living in a moldy house and the closet has a visible mold, you cannot neutralize that mold anymore. You better throw that clothes out. So that's how bad these spores can actually, or at least contaminate the clothes. You can't even get it out. And so it's something that you're going to be mindful of. Like for me, when I was moving out of my moldy apartment, I threw everything out, right? Even my bed, my bedding. I had to get whole new things. But this is how bad mold toxin can be. Cross-contamination from previous exposures as well. If you have anything, and if you, especially living in a moldy house, you gotta have to really assess which things to throw out, what to carry with you, and it can be very headache. In many cases, sometimes just starting out fresh could be the best thing you could do. So environmental input is everything. Common exposure from mold, volatile gases from the mold toxins, electromagnetic field, Wi-Fi radiation, chemical cleaners, heavy metals, right? These are need to address, especially if you are trying to heal. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. You need to address the mold properly, but if you just address the mold in your body and not the environmental toxins, you're just going to be constantly sick and wondering why you're not getting better. I had a client who was in a complete denial that her house was dealing with mold and constantly complaining that the protocol wasn't working. I just said, I'll pay for the mold testing for your house. And if you want to continue working with me, you got to address this thing. I paid for the test results, came back, very high mold issue in her house. And I just said, unless you move out, I cannot work with you anymore. You need to address it, the problem in your house, and either clean it, remediate it, or move to a cleaner environment. Now, there are other several testing. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through this process because obviously we have some other slides to look at. But ERMI testing, these are DNA-based dust testing of your house. and you're able to identify the specific mold content. Air sampling is great. Unfortunately, depending on how the airflow is, this can actually cause a lot of misses and hidden contamination. So I don't particularly recommend it. Moisture mapping as well. If you have a moisture level higher than 50% in a house, most likely you have some kind of a hidden mold issue growing in your house. This is the reason why hiring a proper mold testing company that could do scans and then do looking at the sampling of possible mold behind the wall, under the sink, as well as other moisture prone areas. This is an important factor of hiring the right building biologist or mold specialist to really looking at how your environment is, and you need to really address this issue. Second, the nervous system has to come first, right? You dealt with the environment, now you want to deal with the nervous system. When you're constantly dealing with a high sympathetic, high stress response state, this is causing you not to detox. In order for you to detox, you need to be in a more rest, relaxed state. Okay, this is a part that I teach my client from the get-go. I don't teach them about supplements. I teach them how to regulate the nervous system properly. This reason why, when you're in a higher stress response state, restricted blood flow to the digestive organs can occur, which can impair bile flow and enzymatic activity, which can heighten the inflammatory response, and it overall decreases cellular repair. So trauma and limbic dysregulation, trauma and chronic stress creates a pattern of limbic system activation and perpetuates illness long after the trigger has been removed. And the nervous system becomes conditioned to perceive the normal stimuli as a threat, right? So even the food sensitivity issue that you're dealing with is a threat, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of inflammation and reactivity. When the body feels unsafe, it will not detoxify. So clinical tools to regulate nervous system, heart-centered breathing. That's something I teach all the time. Limbic retraining, programs like dynamic neural retraining system, safe and sound protocols, brain tap to help rewire the limbic system, somatic therapies like body-centered approach to healing the vagal tone exercise, EMF hygiene as well, reducing the electromagnetic field exposure, especially during sleep. This is the reason why you want to turn off your Wi-Fi, helps to decrease neuroinflammation and improve recovery process. Now, when you talk about the mitochondria, now we're going to cellular dysfunction. We talked a lot about membrane damage and enzyme inhibition and antioxidant depleted. This is all resulting into having chronic fatigue, chemical sensitivity issues, immune dysregulation. It also reduces the capacity for detoxing. So to repair the cells, I always recommend phospholipid therapy, especially from BodyBio PC. If you want to try it, I would recommend using my code Dr. Kim, Dr. Kim. You get 20% off anytime at BodyBio. But PC, phospholipid, actually helps to rebuild the damaged cells and the membrane, and start with the low dose for sensitive clients and gradually increase. So I would recommend maybe getting a small bottle of liquid and then do a one single drop on your tongue and slowly increase up to 5 ml, which is 1 teaspoonful, up to 3 teaspoonful, which is 15 mLs, or 1 tablespoonful. Certain mitochondrial support is needed, so especially CoQ10, magnesium, carnitine, B vitamin support is needed for mitochondrial function. You can definitely get that through food, but in many cases, because of the depletion you're dealing with, you may need to supplement. Red and near-infrared light therapy helps to charge the cytochrome C oxidase in the mitochondria. This actually helps to increase ATP or energy production. You don't have to buy a fancy red light therapy. There's something free you could do every single day. Sunlight. Wake up 5 minutes prior to sun coming up or the daybreak, and you want to get the proper sunlight first thing in the morning, and that's going to really help you to get that near and red light that you need for your body's mitochondria to function well. And that actually helps to reset that circadian rhythm. And that's something that I recommend doing. 20 minutes of sun exposure within 10 minutes of waking to help reset the circadian rhythm. And the drainage pathway is also important to support the liver and bile, kidneys, lymphatic system, the intestine, and the skin. When there's block bile, you could end up having to reabsorb that mold toxin. There's systemic inflammation. Detox without drainage is retoxin. You're basically recirculating that toxin over again. Many reasons why people are not getting better. Protocol for detox support, bile flow and elimination support, such as gentle sauna therapy, combined with appropriate binders, lymphatic movement, and mineral support as well. I'm drinking mineral right now from Body By. It's something that I drink every single day. Mold also causes the mucosal terrain collapse. Address leaky gut before you address the mold issue. Rebalancing the microbiome isn't just about changing the bugs in your gut, is dismantling the hostile terrain and rebuilding the immune ecological imbalance you're dealing with. So what mold exposure does is it actually causes GI and immune interference. So leaky gut is one thing, but second, fungal overgrowth plus dysbiosis. So common pattern is you're dealing with chronic candida infection, aspergillus, penicillium, and methane or hydrogen producing bacteria, which can cause bloating when you eat something. This is called a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. If you're dealing with biofilms, which 99% of people who I work with end up having to deal with, biofilms, these are supposed to be there to protect the pathogens from antifungals and immune system. And the issue is that you can't clean the mold toxins out correctly. So microbiome imbalance, you need to really address multiple ways. Goal isn't just about probiotic diversity. One, you want to remove the pathogen load, targeting the fungal overgrowth and colonization. And then two, to restore the digestive integrity, biofilm disruption, and rebuilding the ecosystem properly. And this is a part that I teach in my mold course, but also people who are doing one-on-one with me as well. Final step is resiliency. What does that look like? Well, redefining the resiliency by ability to bounce back without reactivation. And anti-fragility in the end goal, not just about remission and capacity to withstand future exposures without relapse. The key things that you want to look at is how to emotionally master yourself and terrain maintenance, right? You're going to be exposed to toxins all the time. But if you are able to maintain that terrain correctly by eating well, by sleeping well, pooping, regulating your nervous system well, cellular health, right? All these things are related to terrain maintenance, which is going to keep you resilient, right? To withstand the toxins and the stress response you're dealing with. And this also plays into immune tolerance, metabolic flexibility, so you could enjoy your food, right? And able to still maintain the weight, and nervous system regulation. So without building resilience, patients often experience symptoms reoccurring with minimal re-exposure to triggers. So building a mold resilient body, ongoing detox tools I mentioned about, regular sauna therapy, red light therapy, intermittent fasting. I usually don't recommend mold toxins to skip meals, because skipping meals can actually cause glucose dip, and that could also address causing more cortisol spike. But intermittent fasting can be helpful during the end of the protocol. Mitochondrial support nutrients, environmental hygiene such as dehumidifier, air filtration, regular maintenance inspection, and low EMF sleeping environment, and resilient rituals, right? Regular breath work, prayer, meditation, consistent circadian rhythm, and nervous system reset techniques. So I want to just give you a case example. This is a 38-year-old female, moved from New York City apartment with black mold, right? She moved out, developed a chronic fatigue, food sensitivity problem, extreme supplement intolerance. She couldn't just tolerate anything else. The initial approach is not to give her supplements, but instead we worked on a nervous system regulation with more of a heart-centered breathing, limbic retraining, added phospholipid therapy very slowly in microdoses and gradually increasing. In the interim, we also support the gut microbiome and bile flow with gentle herbs and introducing low dose of binders only, just to get the drainage pathway opened up. And we address the gut dysbiosis, and then timely adding on antifungals. So after about 8 months, she was not in the difference. Regained energy, started tolerating supplements again, developed minimal activity to environmental triggers, and restored her quality of life. It happens quite often if you are addressing these things in a very systemic and careful way, methodical way to address these problems. Give you a conclusion of today's talk. The clinical algorithm of mold treatment: identify the mold history and exposure. This is exactly how I address my clients' issues there, and removing the exposure or mitigating it, calming the nervous system, rebuilding the mitochondrial cell membrane, opening the detox pathway, and addressing the gut and immune dysfunction. So especially antifungals, binders, and microbiome support are key things to getting it done. And then lastly, rebuilding resiliency. Those are the things that I really like to do. Summary: I know you guys already stayed almost 50 minutes at this point in time. Mold illness is a complex and systemic issue, right? So mycotoxins creates a structural cellular damage. So you need to really address in the multi-systemic issues that person is dealing with, and requires a very comprehensive approach to healing. Standard detox protocol often fail because I just mentioned about how much of a shortcoming of not addressing things like nervous system regulation, cellular repair, and proper drainage establishment. And so tonight, introducing the ENCORE method, it really provides that particular roadmap for everybody to addressing the environment, nervous system, cellular repair, optimize the detox pathway, rebalance the microbiome, enhancing resilience, and systemic approach to restoring health. I want to really leave this message for you. Healing begins when the body feels safe, when the cells have energy and terrain is restored. These are really key things that I want to teach you tonight, and hopefully you guys are able to hear loudly and look at toxicity much more differently. If you are wondering, this is a lot of stuff, and how do I address it? How do I take care of my own health? That's something that I want to introduce to everybody tonight. I want to really give you an exclusive attendee package. Usually for discovery calls, I charge around $250. So 45 minutes. And it's a deep dive analysis into what you're dealing with. It doesn't give you anything related to protocol, but it's just to see what kind of issue you have and looking at the health history, some of the key dysfunctional issues going on. And you will receive a personalized recovery roadmap, right, of what to look at and how to step forward. But I want to add a little more value for you guys tonight. I know people out there, you're here because you're dealing with mold issues and you obviously want to learn more about it. If you decide to sign up for today's package, I'm going to give you my mold-free nutrient guide for free. It's $50 value. If you sign up, I'll email that to you right away. And then I'm also going to give you Conquer the Mold Toxin Guidebook. This is exactly what I taught for the last 13 weeks with my students. It's going to be a very short version of it. Has a $300 value in itself, a bridge version of the full 13 weeks, but it's still a good amount of information. It's a comprehensive guide for free. It's a $300 value as well. So it's almost a $600 value you're going to be getting. And for tonight, as a promo for everybody, I'm going to do that for $150 for you. So if you are wondering, man, is Dr. Kim a good fit for me? Or I'm just wondering if I could even do this. If you just want to have a discussion and really look at this in a different ways, I'm going to give you a special entry point for you to join without much commitment, right? It's $150, 45 minutes. It's going to really help you, guide you to look at this differently. And you get two cool guidelines that you can still utilize. So that's something that I want to leave for you today. However, this is only open for US and Canadian clients. So unfortunately, I cannot help any clients who are living in Europe or other countries because of liability restrictions, but I at least want to give this opportunity to US and Canadian clients. If you are interested in doing this and really getting to the root of the issue, what I'll do is I will leave this in the chat box. Hopefully this works. All right. I would like to at least open up for questions. And what I'm going to do is on the Q&A box, I'm going to post the link for everybody to book a call if you like. That's obviously something that I want to gift you guys as well. Other questions, everybody? I see Adam here, Alice Scudato, Jill Todd, Robin's still here, and SJ's here as well. Do you have any questions about the topic for today? If you are wanting to book a call, I did also drop in a in-call message as well as to adding in the Q&A box as well. So the mold course has already been done. That's not going to be, the information is not going to be available until August. That's all the recordings I've done already for 13 weeks. I taught 25 students. There were some practitioners there as well, but that's going to be released as of August. Look out for that email, and I'll probably do another webinar to introduce what I'm going to be doing. There's a full 13 weeks. I put a lot of my protocol there, step by step, in terms of how to address mold issues. So everything will be there for that. Price point wise, it's going to be $750. So anyone who signs up early, I'm going to give a $250 discount. The mold course initially was $1,500 when I was doing the live course. So it was live 13-week module course. It was like a 3-hour every Monday, actually. So there was a lot more hands-on, but this is going to be recorded and you could go at your own pace. So that's going to be $750 for the mold course, $250 off for early sign-up. That will be available very soon, not until August though. Anyone have any question about? No, I'm going to offer this discount for 7 days. So it's going to be up until next Wednesday. I'm going to be sending out an email to book a call. I'm also going to be putting the recording tomorrow once the video is all decoded and all edited. But yes, SJ, you could, if you want to book a call, you could do it sometime later. But yeah, please download that link, or at least click that link and save it. But I'm also going to be sending out the booking link on tomorrow's email with the recording. So look out for that as well. All right. Any other questions? Jill Todd is saying, thank you for this information. I've been very interested in mold detox. Thank you for joining. Anyone else? No one has any other questions? Did I do such a good job that no one has questions, or did I just poke out of my ass? You don't have to test the mold first. I could order the test for you anyway. I usually do real-time labs, urine mycotoxin testing with organic acid and glyphosate testing. But on top of that, I do still recommend doing stool analysis. Just as you saw how complex that gut microbiome is from mold. So I'd like to look at both along with some other blood tests. We could discuss that on a first discovery call. So this is where the $150 offer is coming to you tonight. So you could book a call, discuss what other options you might need. Maybe you don't need a mold toxin, right? Maybe you have test results from maybe 6 months ago and you just want to discuss and see what other options that you have to work with me. That is an availability. Usually I charge $650 for those kind of calls, because if I'm doing like a lab review, it does take a long time to go through it. So I do charge $650 for that, but you can end that for $150. At least I'm just trying to open up a doorway for people to book a call and easily figuring out what the difficulties are. I don't do in person. If you're wondering if I'm doing calls at my pharmacy, this is 100% virtual. Please click on that link and book a call. There's a complete separate practice. It's not the pharmacy. I had local patients thinking they could book a call and meet me in person. This is virtual. Anyone else? Click on that link, please. I'm going to email everybody tomorrow, but at least download that, take a look at that. I only have limited spots. I'm only accepting 12 clients. So if you could book a call, and especially summer coming up, limited hours. All right. Any takeaway from today's webinar? You guys are awfully quiet today. Like I said, either I did a good job or bad job, or just like so. All right. If no one has any questions, I'm going to adjourn today's topic of Beyond the Detox. The recording will be sent to you tomorrow. I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and then you're going to have the link, and you can share the link as well. The offer for the call is going to be good for 7 days with a discount. And once you book it, the free offers of the resource will be sent over to you as well. If you are interested about the mold course, I'm going to be offering that again in month of August. And the pricing for that is going to be $750, but for early signups, it's going to be $250 off. So it's going to be $500 investment of the full mold protocol that I put together for clients. So that is it. And I appreciate all of you joining. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you and share the wonderful stories of how to deal with mold properly. Thank you, and have a good night.